Hello, everybody. I'm Gabriel Weiner, and I am a voice teacher in New York City. And I do these episodes with some interesting people on my YouTube channel that I'm very happy to be doing today. And I want to introduce all of you to my dear friend and esteemed guest, Abigail Brown. Abby, thank you for being with me.
I'm grateful to be here.
Do you want to tell people who you are just so that they know who they're about to listen to?
Okay, I'm the founder of Arts Anonymous. Arts is about 42 years old. It's a very tiny program, but it deals with artists who are avoidant, artists who are emerging, artists who have been visible and something happened and they want to pick up their career again, and artists who retired and never got a chance to explore their creativity, and now is the time. So it's a wide audience, and we have quite a few meetings, and we're international. We
Yeah.
go from Australia to Russia.
Mm. And since you're working with artists for 42 years and Arts Anonymous helping people kind of recover their artistic selves, what would you say the profile of an artist is? What is an artist how we should talk about that. What is an artist as opposed to what? Non-artist?
Well, let's translate that into what is a gifted person. Okay. So long before there was the Industrial Revolution, when things became mass produced in the hundreds and the thousands and the tens of thousands and in the millions, and cargo ships are traveling across the oceans. Before that, everything was made by man. And there was no instruction, there was no schooling. Children were recognized for their gift, and then they were brought into some kind of studio or guild and or farming, where their particular skill set was needed. So back then, if you were gifted, you had something unique to contribute to society, and you were recognized for that. And we don't have that system now. So what happens is that children grow up in homogenized schooling. And right now in America, everything is skilled towards computer concepts, and there's no longer woodworking, there's no longer art classes weekly, there's no longer music classes. So the gifted children are not getting the kind of encouragement to follow their gift.
Hmm.
Now, what happens if you don't follow it? It haunts you, it calls to you, it never leaves you. It waits and waits endlessly for you to show up. And we know it. Those of us who are gifted know this. It's a heartbreak, it's a grief. We need it. But there's some, there are artists that are musicians and independent and visual artists and writers and so on. But there are also gifted people who are inventors and innovators and social commentaries. In fact, Gabriel's and my friendship goes way back. And I think he's a social commentary, which is one reason why we've decided to do a podcast together. We both have books, we both have an expertise built over a lifetime of, single focus on people who are gifted, and we have something to say. But I'm older than Gabriel. My life is coming to an end, and Gabriel's is mid-career. And my hope for this podcast that we're going to do is that Gabriel is going to become a social commentator. That's the way
Well,
he talks, that's the way he gives.
you broke the news before I did. Yeah, well, it's funny. I agree that I I'm a social commentator. I've been a social critic since I was very, very young. And it does come through in my singing lessons, and I find that it really enriches my teaching. I think it helps my students kind of have a context. And to piggyback on what you were saying about, basically, it sounds like there was a suppression or a lack of platforming or a lack of outlets that happened after the Industrial Revolution, where we became, as you said, homogenized. And so now there's this kind of suppressed instinct. And the way I talk about it as a singing teacher is that a lot of us don't sing as much as we should because there's just not as much opportunity. If you're in an office for, you know, 10 hours a day or however long you are, in that context, erupting into singing is not the most acceptable or appropriate. And so I remember when I was working in an office environment, I used to kind of feel like I really want to sing. And if I did, I couldn't really do it because I had somebody working in a cubicle next to me. And so I'd hum and so then, of course, I was miserable. I needed to get out of the front of the computer and that office environment. Because aside from being a social commentator, I think I'm just a very verbal and vocal person. And I think that a singer likes to use their vocal folds to make melodic sounds. And if you have a job or if you're in a situation where you can't do that, you're going to start to feel like something is missing. And that's usually when they go on the internet and Google a voice teacher and find me. And then I use my social commentary in that one on one lesson to tell them, like, this is what happened. And you just kind of said that beautifully that after the Industrial Revolution, that homogenization and standardization, even with the academic model, it just kind of really narrowed down our expression. And I think that not just physical expression, but all forms of expression. And I think that that is sad. And that's why I think we need outlets. And so this podcast for you and me is an outlet because I think you and I have a lot to say. So yeah, that's great. You have anything to say about any of that?
Well, I just segued, off of it to what would have happened to Shakespeare if he had had to be a brilliant programmer. We would have lost so much wisdom, so much joy, so much identifying with these characters and so on. What would have happened if we lost Walt Whitman, in Leaves of Grass? The guy was an incredible eccentric, but look what he contributed, you know. And the list of artists who, now this is where my expertise comes in, the list of artists who struggled with mood swings,
Mm,
you know, and it reads like a who's who of every famous artist ever. And it goes all the way back to Michelangelo. In fact, it goes all the way back to Noah, who was self-medicated with alcohol.
mm,
But back then, no one taught you how to build a ship. No one taught you how to build a ship big enough to carry a whole bunch of animals. No one taught you how to read the weather, that there were seasons in which there were floods and the floods were getting higher and higher, and we might need such a boat. And everybody discounted him because he was an alcoholic. He was also a genius. And
mm,
he had those mood swings, which he had to medicate.
mm.
So there's many myths back there that those were the artists.
Yeah, they've been in every time in history, and I know in your story you wanted to go to art school, from what I've heard, and your parents were not all for it, which is another common theme now because some people don't think it's. I don't know why your parents were resisting it, but it's advantageous to go to art school or to become an artist because it seems like it's not a responsible or intelligent financial path to take. But one of the things I'm very passionate about is that We don't really get a say on our DNA structure and makeup. And so it is our job to find out who that individual that came out of our mother's womb is, because we didn't decide how tall we were going to be, or what eye color we were going to have, what kind of hair we were going to. So we don't decide certain things about the way that our um, personality, structure, temperament is formed. And so it is our job to find out who we are and then find how we can bring that to the world so that we can find a good fit, instead of just from the outside in, where it's like, oh, what's smart for you to do is to do this or that because this is where the market is going or whatever. Because again, if we struggle with mood swings, as you said, which is very common in artists, add to that career dissatisfaction, or add to that just being not fitting into whatever you're tasked with doing or being, you're going to feel a horrible combination of both dissatisfaction that you would feel even if you didn't have mood swings. And then it's a double whammy. So we have to find out. And that's why I think if someone's a singer, they better sing. If someone's a dancer, they better dance. Because,
That's
like I
right.
said, we don't really get a say in our genetic makeup. It's just who we are. And that's a huge passion of mine, to help my students and my singing students specifically find also what genre to sing. Because, singing is not a monolith. There's an opera singer, there's a jazz singer, there's a folk singer, there's all these different kinds of singing that happen. And you better find out what the best fit for you is if you're going to both be satisfied and thrive in that.
Wow, that is so cool. I love that you. I bet you other music teachers don't do that because they teach you theory, and you have to know the theory before you can do, a personal expression. When I was a girl, I'm one of four girls, and all of us had to take piano lessons. And my two older sisters had a teacher, and I used to sit on the stairs and listen to my older sister play. But by that time, she had a couple of years behind her, and it was simple, but she would play. And so then in church, a woman approached my mother and said that she was a piano teacher and she was nearby, and my mother let me go there. And it was about 5 blocks away. I would bike to it. You open the door. It smelled of beautiful home cooked food, cookies, lamb, all of this sort of stuff. She was a real mother. I didn't have that. And she, had the big bosom, but she cared. And right from the beginning, she sought out music that would appeal to me. And one of the things that appealed to me, I've been trying to find it my whole life, you know, but I loved her and I loved playing the piano. And so I came home and I made a massive mistake. I told my mother that I wanted to be a piano player. I never would have succeeded, but I would have gone into the field and I would have been happy. So immediately she took me away from this teacher
Mm,
and she gave me the one that my sisters had used. And I had to bike in the dark a mile to get to this place. And I'm afraid of the dark. And still in my 80s, I'm afraid of the dark. And so then I would get to this house. It was a big brick house. Every window was black, except for a light over the piano. And I had to learn scales.
mm,
So the very first recital I went to, I forgot everything.
mm.
And there was no inspiration. There was nothing with which I could hang my heart on. And for me, if my heart is not involved, I'm not there.
Yeah,
I'm just
it's
not
it.
there. I
I'm the
know that.
same way. Yeah, it
Really?
wasn't a match. It wasn't a match. It didn't have enough of what made you feel connected. So a lot of people don't know this, and I've never really spoken too publicly about this. But I did not have good grades as a student, and I failed many important tests. Back, I grew up in the Dominican Republic, and if I was to get to college there, you had to pass the four national tests, they call it, and there was the Spanish one, which is the official language there, and then there was math, social studies, and science. And I failed the math, social studies, and science, and only passed the the Spanish one, the language one, because that's my forte. And I was just thinking about this recently. And look, I mean, I'm doing pretty well for myself, even though I did not succeed in those things.
Well, let me put that into contemporary words. Gabriel is one of the most articulate people I know.
Oh, thank you.
And when he was a child, he read the encyclopedia. So
Yes.
the ability to learn was always there. It was
Mm,
just the wrong things. These things like math and spelling and geography. I got a story about that. They're not ours. We need to be instructed in an inspired way. And anything that's rote, forget about it for me. I'm never gonna
yeah.
retain it. If
Well,
it's not inspired, forget about it.
like you, when I heard the story of that first teacher with the smells of the cookies and the home cooked meals and the big bosom and the motherly like teacher, those things also make me feel cozy and warm and want to be there. And of course, you'd feel inspired to want to go back there. And then the other one, which was dark and cold and scary and all of that, then of course I wouldn't want to go there. And that's why we have to know ourselves very well. And so, I don't know that I ever even felt ashamed that I had these poor grades. I took the SATs and I didn't get great grades, and I didn't even go to a good college. And I notice in New York City, there's a lot of professionals that went to some of the best schools. I've been on dates with them and we talk, and sometimes there's not much of a match because their kind of intelligence or the way that they like interpret the world and reality and relate to me and others is so different from the way that I do. So that's why I started with what is an artist, because I think there's a reason why I don't fit, and I never really fit that academic model. I suspect, as you said, that had I been down that path, it wouldn't have gone too well for me. I don't like the standardized testing. I don't like the academic model that we have. And so I'm very different from the traditional teaching. It's not about just technique, it's about liberating what is like already naturally there. And I believe, to use your word, that it is a gift. It's a genetic gift, and that if we overtrain it or over condition it, over socialize it, then it becomes stifled. It becomes inhibited, and I don't like that. So I'm here to like untrain people, deprogram people from these parameters that get set by you know, Western culture or whatever it is. Because before all that, going back to your Noah thing, none of these schools existed. None of these things that we have now were here. The whole GPA system didn't exist. The whole grade system didn't exist. The whole like get this degree and that degree before you can do this didn't exist. So it's completely different thing.
Yeah, I want to dovetail into what you're saying in terms of education. I have a very good friend who is the school counselor for grades 1 through 12 in a small town. And so children come to her when they've been misbehaving. And she is there to find out what's going on and what's wrong and all that sort of stuff. Guess who comes to her? It breaks my heart. The artists. They're freaked out. They have no place. Look at me, I'm going to cry.
Mm.
They have no place in the school now. They have no venue, no outlet. And guess what she does? She gives them crayons and paper. And an hour later, they're okay, But it's terrible. It's just terrible what's out there.
I
Just
remember
terrible.
I rebelled against school. Kindergarten, I was like, I can't do this. I don't want this. This feels like prison to me. I was lucky enough to have a non-traditional mother who said, okay, well then don't go. And I was very happy that she did that. And like you said, I would read the encyclopedia, and of course, I went to traditional school. I just didn't do so well in it because that model doesn't work very well for me, especially at that time and in the place where I went. I think I would have done better in a more artistic environment, creative, that would be more wondering like, okay, who are you? What are you interested in? Let me give you more of that instead of here's what I want to feed you and let's see how well you can do that. Because I'm not as I guess compliant or motivated by trying to please the teacher. I'm more motivated by trying to like appease the inner callings that I have of like, oh, I want to learn more about this. Oh, I want. So what's perfect for that? An encyclopedia. It's so many volumes. There's an index, and then I can look through it and find out what interests me, and then I can just go down that rabbit hole instead of just taking the things that they're teaching everybody as if we were all the same, which we're not, because as you said,
And
we.
AI, and I think AI is going to liberate, all those rote things that we had to learn to fit, a square into a round hole, vice versa. They're going to be taken over by an AI intelligence. And then what are we going to do? Right now, high school, this is 2026. And right now, high school graduates have more jobs than college graduates.
Mm, wow, I didn't know that statistic.
I read it
Yeah.
yesterday.
Wow, wow. Oh, it sounds like something is shifting in what's needed in the culture, and that's a very optimistic view of AI because a lot of people have a negative view of it. But I think that the artists might, going forward, be more needed in a way because AI can't do that, can it?
No, it can. And I think that the liberation will actually change society. I think it's as big as the Industrial Revolution when all of us had to conform. Now, there's going to be an intelligence that does everything. So maybe we can back out of all that and get back to learning the kind of things that we're gifted to do, you know.
So in the meantime, Abby, those people that feel that calling in them and they don't really have a way of answering it because they don't know how to, is that usually when they find Arts Anonymous and join the program?
That is a very good question. Arts Anonymous is very tiny, and it is different. It is part of the anonymous programs, and a lot of people have heard Alcoholics Anonymous, Food Addicts Anonymous. You probably didn't know there's sex programs for a compulsive, and let's see, drugs. There's like 100 of them,
Mhm.
including those for diseases. And basically, there's a 12-step program practically for everything that is unmanageable. So I came in through that channel. My life just, well, my life was very successful, but Abby was incredibly unhappy. And
Mm,
so unhappiness actually just tumbled me into a 12-step program. And I was in one for a year, and I knew all the artists. And one day I said, we need a meeting for artists. And so I called it and they came. And in that very meeting, somebody said, I'm powerless over my creativity. And boom, but it's a positive. And
mm,
the other 12-step programs are dealing with compulsive behaviors, which are negative. So arts has a different twist in terms of recovery. Well, what's happened is that people who come in through one program travel through it's like not a conveyor, a cafeteria, you
Mm,
know, and so you come in as an alcoholic and then you realize that you're a child of an alcoholic family. So you go there and then you decide that, oh my God, I'm a workaholic. Let me go there. So they travel through these other programs and then Arts Anonymous is usually the last. And and all of the anonymous programs depend upon 12 simple sentences, which I compare back to the Ten Commandments, because the commandments came out in the time of Moses, 1,000 years before, Christ was born, and there were no laws, so society kind of existed, but you got in a fight with somebody, you could end up dead, and there were prisons, there weren't institutions for those that were mentally unstable. There was nothing.
mm,
And all of a sudden, the Ten Commandments came down and it said one God. So you couldn't have all these different people, fighting each other. Well, mine is superior to yours. And it said, don't covet your neighbor's wife. Can you imagine what went on back then? If marriage wasn't sacred, the guy next door could turn around and seduce your wife, and there was no punishment you
mm.
know. So, and then there was about 10 of them, and they started a situation of moral consciousness socially. Fast forward, you have these 12 steps, and they're very simple, very, very, very simple. But when you start,
This is for alcoholics because also, like you said, they don't have any, when you're intoxicated all the time, you don't have any boundaries, any rules, any structure. And so then this is a more personal structure. The other one was more for society. This is more for the individual alcoholic. Huh?
right. See, that's why Gabriel is smart. He's able to make these jumps, and you're absolutely right. The 12 steps are for a personal moral accountability. And you come from a history where whatever you were doing to act out had some immoral consequences,
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and anyway, so there's 12 steps, and most of the programs are dealing with the negative. So their journey has to be accountability for the negative things that you have done in life. Arts deals with you didn't live a life, you were under being. You
Mm,
were, one of the arts members says, I was not written in the book of life.
mm.
So you're out here, just on automatic, and there's a terrible grief.
It sounds
And
like
so,
one of the programs that you find before arts are for cleaning up, and then arts is for showing up, right? Which
yes,
are
well done. Well done. See how he is? He's very quick.
synthesizing. Oh, I love doing it and find patterns. Yeah, it's a big part of being a voice teacher. It's finding patterns and then synthesizing things, making everything more succinct and simple so that the person can stop overthinking. As you know, that's one of my big passions, right? So that people are not thinking while they sing. Yeah.
Oh, that's a very important thing. So, just wrapping up, Arts Anonymous teaches from step 6 through 12. Arts Anonymous gives you skill set to live in the present and to
Yeah.
stay out of the past.
So it's
And
like
if you're,
12
yeah,
personal commandments.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're living in the present, and you're an artist or you're gifted, pick it up. That's the whole point. Pick it up, be happy, learn what you didn't learn as a child, learn to do as a skill set, and be happy. So that's kind of a different journey than the other 12 steps. Now, what did you
I
just say
love
that
that.
I wanted? Oh,
I yeah, go ahead.
yeah, you said something about don't rely on the brain, just, so I have a lot to say on that too. Your brain is was a blank. when you were born, and you fed it. And whatever you fed it, that's what the brain does. It's great for reading maps. It's great for the instructions. It's great for anything wrote, but it's not your moral Geiger counter. It's not. Your heart is. And if you come into a 12-step program, the chances are you're not living from your heart. You're living from addiction and compulsion and the negativity that comes from a family that's, not that's dysfunctional. Let's say
Yeah,
that.
it possibly a lot of self-medication, like you said, Noah was doing, because you don't have a context of understanding why you feel the need to self-medicate. So in an alcoholic, you mentioned that Noah had an alcohol thing because he had mood problems, right?
Yeah, it's in the Bible that
Yeah,
he was a known alcoholic.
yeah. And he didn't have a 12-step program yet.
No, but he also didn't have medication. So I just want to emphasize that. I hate the word mental illness, hate it,
Mm.
but they have got medications just like for diabetes. They got medications for heart disease, and there are extreme mood swings. I don't know other way to say it. They're artistic. You know what they do in a psych ward? They have a room that has crayons and paper, you know. And yeah, they're highly creative. And or this last year I was reading about an Olympic star, a woman, and she had to take a year off because of her mood swings, you know. So, and there are a lot of them, a lot
Yeah,
of them.
whenever I hear those stories about an Olympic star like that having mood disorders or a person struggling with their mental well-being, I always go to what does their life look like? Because in that high pressure competitive environment, that would probably exacerbate any pre-existing mood, issues that there might be there. And also in a creative person that's not being creative, I always have the suspicion that it exacerbates whatever is there. So in other words, a person can have mood disorder, but if they don't have a lifestyle or a life that supports who they are as a person and that is balanced, then I think it's going to make things much worse. So when you mentioned that athlete that's elite like that, well, the kinds of pressures that a person like that is. So I always wonder, like, what is it that makes somebody need that year off? What is it that's making somebody need all that medication? What is it that's making somebody? And I always wonder, is it also their lifestyle that is not supporting them living and being wellness as a whole? I'm not denying the mood
You can
swing.
it has a social component. You can definitely say that. But it's also running really deep in family histories. Really, really, really deep. I am bipolar. I'm certain my mother was bipolar. My mother's sister has children that are bipolar. There's a grandfather, I don't know why he was in and out of sanitariums. He could have been an alcoholic. He could be having mood swings. Rage runs in my family. Way back at the turn of the 1800s to the 1900s, there was a relative who made inventions with, other partners, and he had a rage problem. And he would walk out and the partner would make millions.
Mm.
And that happened, it happens. And it happens a lot with creative people, and it's genetic. I'm not going to say that. I think yes, it can be exacerbated, but it's there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if in your family tree there are people who talk to themselves, you know reacted to whatever that voice is, that's genetic.
yeah,
Has
yeah.
nothing to do with environment.
Oh, well, I agree. I think that schizotypal, these brain conditions, they're traits too, and it's inherited. I think it is heritable. It can or cannot express itself. But what I'm thinking about is like when I hear those stories, I'm wondering like, is that person sleeping well? Are they in the right relationship? You know, do they have a good job? Are they do they have a right livelihood? Do they have loving people around them? You see what I mean? I tend to go to, does this person have the support they need? Even medication. And if they don't, I tend to think that that's going to make everything worse. It's like walking around with a broken bone and not getting any
Yeah,
treatment. Yeah.
that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I mean, I was diagnosed until I was 60. And then I was put on medication, and now those mood swings are not as wide, And I had a doctor once early on, just before I was getting medicated, and I talked to him about what was going on and this and that, and the tears and all of this desperation. And he said, "Well, people normally are between this here." Let's turn it this way. So normal is this. And he said, people go like this, above and below, above and below. And he said, and this is normal, and you are down here.
Mm.
It was true. It was absolutely true. And so when I got medicated, and I'm not overly medicated, I'm very lucky, but life became manageable. Now, I started arts when I was 37 or 39. And so I was dealing with it and a lifetime of therapy. If you're just dealing with depression, you're in and out. You know, if you're dealing with marriage counseling, you're in and out or you're divorced. This is not the case with people who are dealing with severe mood swings. It's a lifetime of therapy. And so
Yeah.
I'm a tremendous advocate. Get diagnosed, don't take it personally, it's genetic, and get the right meds and live your life.
Yes, yes, and that's the more like biological aspect of the self. But like we talked about, there's this social aspect or even this artistic aspect. And I would say if you're an artist, find support to help you express that artistry. Because if you don't, then it can really affect you. And it may not be the same thing as the mood stuff, sometimes they're combined, right? Because we know that artists mostly deal with these things, that creativity and these mood things usually come as a package deal, right?
You
That it's
do.
not right. So it's not just that you get the negative of the mood disorder or the mental health condition, but you also get the positive. And so it's important to have ways in which to express it. And I would imagine that people that feel stuck and blocked, they find Arts Anonymous and then they join the 12-step program, and then they have a system or a way in which they can find the way to unblock themselves and be creative again. And again, there's an epidemic of people that are creative and that are artistic that don't have any outlet that is viable for them. And so I see it all the time in my studio that people come and I can literally see, and it's very obvious, they're very unhappy and they think it's just stress, but it's also all you're doing is going into an office for 60 hours a week. And and you're a creative person that wants to sing and you're not singing more than maybe an hour a week. You need to be singing a lot more than that if you're going to function. And for some reason people think that that's like a luxury or it's optional or it's like a side thing, but it is required by your system that you do it. It is not an option.
It's not an option. It's absolutely not an option. It's a calling. It will haunt you. That relative that was an inventor. I have a little book of inventions. I think about it all the time. There's no time to pursue it. but I have my little book. You have to pay attention. For me, the gift is like a soul thing. I can't think up the gift. It's impossible. But the gift is out there. And every gift speaks to you, speaks to Gabriel in the language that Gabriel needs to hear and in the language that I need to hear, and I don't own it. And a lot of great artists will say they don't own it. The Puccini said about Madame Butterfly, he said, I didn't write it, God wrote it. And I mean, that's soul to soul. And so you need that relationship. It makes you
Yeah,
whole,
yeah.
you know. It verifies who you really are. So it's just so important. But
I
if
find
you
that
come from a functional family, getting that out is a big problem.
when you come from a dysfunctional family, getting that out is a big problem, you said?
Becoming visible. Yeah.
Because
I
you,
mean, yeah. Like you said, people are singers and they're jazz or Broadway or classical or something like that. They need a venue with which to have it flow forward. And with singing, there's choirs in churches if you want to go that way. But there should be much more. There should be, jazz ensembles that people take to go on a date. There should be so many more outlets for the creative person.
yeah, yeah, and there will be more as more of us become visible and allow ourselves permission to do this. And I think that that's one of the things that we lose is permission. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Permission to be an artist, which is why I think I do this interview, and we're going to be doing our podcast to support those people that have this secret. I often compare being an artist to being gay because being gay, you have to come out of the closet. And it's an identity piece that is very big. And I notice a lot of people are afraid to say, I'm a writer, I'm a singer, I'm a dancer, I'm an actor, I'm a painter, I'm a whatever. It tends to be a private thing, just like being gay. And there's a fear and a vulnerability that if they say that then it's going to require something of them or it's going to add pressure or something because they're not ready yet to claim that part of their identity, to say, I am an artist. People have a much easier time saying, I am a lawyer, I am a doctor, and they say that with pride. Some people, maybe not, but it's harder for people to say, I'm an artist. Because then, I think that that adds on the pressure. And I feel like there's a coming out to oneself that you have to do, like by realizing, because it's an identity piece, right? Like what sexual orientation, for example, it's an identity piece. It's like, oh, that's why I'm not attracted to the opposite sex, and that's why I'm attracted to the same. And it's a long process because there's not a lot of representation out there, and not a lot of permission out there. And then you come to, and then slowly you go through this process of, oh, I'm gay. And that's hard to say. And then maybe you don't like, for my case, I didn't like saying that or being that because I had all of these negative representations. And I think with artists, it's the same. It's like they're broke. They're crazy. They're weird. And with me for gay was like they're promiscuous. They're over the top. They're too whatever. And I was shy of telling myself in the world that. And I think with art is the same thing. People are like, oh, they're broke, they're disorganized, they're chaotic, they'll be unemployed, they're all these negative things. And so we have to, like, again, like I said, I don't know that we can choose this. I think that we either are or we aren't. And we're going to suffer for as long as we keep trying to deny it and suppress it. And I think that that's what we want to do is give people permission and a space to be like, yeah, I'm an artist. Not
Or
not an easy thing to
I'm
do.
an inventor. For instance, Thomas Edison went through 1,000 tries before he got the light bulb. And somebody said to him, how do you feel about 1,000 mistakes? And he said, there weren't any mistakes. There was just a work process, and for like getting a plane to fly, the Wright brothers took 20 tries before they got a plane to fly 20 miles,
That
you
doesn't even
know.
sound like that much.
Yeah. And so there are also group creative things, like we just sent somebody around the moon. And the first
Mhm.
time they went around the moon, they didn't have a computer network bigger than what we have on a cell phone, So there's a ton of creativity in jobs out there that AI isn't going to be able to take over.
Mhm.
But there's a ton of creative people. Like you take a child who's the son, daughter of a farmer, you know, um, look at all the things that are creative there. You have to know soil, you have to know weather, you have to know fungus, and you have to know when things came about and how to do things. There's no book. There's no book, you know? And I think that's part of being an artist or an inventor. There's no book. And that's
Yeah,
what makes it exciting.
yeah, yeah. And Emerson, one of my favorite Western philosophers, said that it's all inside of us, and that we just have to discover it. And when you're saying there's no book, there's no this, there's no that, it's like there's a code inside of you, a genetic code, a soul code, a cell code, whatever. It's in you, and there's something that wants to be birthed through you. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think it's a distraction to be looking for the answer in a book or outside. So
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of meditation personally because I sit down quietly and I feel like all these things that I couldn't find in any book or school or with any teacher start to bubble up. And that's not a
Uh,
coincidence. It's all in there. And so we just need to um, be willing to listen to the inside. And that's what I'm a teacher in quotes, but it's more just like a facilitator for that kind of thing. And I'm very much into asking people, well, what do you like? How do you want to sound? Where you do you want to go? Instead of me saying, do this, do that, or I think you should do this, or I think you should do that. And a lot of times they're just like, I don't know, you tell me. And I go, no, no, no. Let's think about it. What kind of things call you the most? Like it sounds like inventions and inventors are very precious to you. You have your little book there, and so that's something that you want to learn more about. That's your thing, and that's what I love about art. That whatever art form you do, it's your thing. It's not something that was imposed by your parents or by society or by the culture. It's something that you
yeah,
came with, that you have inside,
that's
that
right.
lines up with
That's
your trait profile. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. My grandfather, when he married my grandmother, she wanted a pension, and there weren't that many pensions around, but the government did a pension for post office people. So back then, 1920s, 1900s, early, your postman, took a horse and rode around and gave you your mail, and there was a pension for 20 years. So Grandpa did that for 20 years, but what he really wanted to do was build houses
Mm.
according to his plan. So he would build a house after he got the pension, and there was codes even back then, and the code said this is what you have to do for electricity and plumbing, and he'd pass the code, and then he'd undo it and do what he
Oh,
wanted to. And he, was climbing on houses on the roofs into his 80s and
mm.
building these houses, basically according to whatever he wanted, you know. And he made my grandma rich. He
Oh,
built 8 houses.
when you say he doesn't do it, you meant he didn't follow the code? Is that what you meant?
He thought some of the code was stupid. So he would pass the code and then he would redo it according to the way he thought it should be done. And
Uh,
he was successful, you know? Yeah.
I misunderstood. I thought you meant he didn't do it because he didn't have the skills, but then he ended up doing what he wanted to do.
Yeah, he definitely had the skill set. And one of the memories I have, I was about 7 years old, and this one was very significant. You know, he made for the church, he made two matching collection bowls out of redwood. He had a workshop, and they were curved like this, and they had a lip, and they were about 10 inches across, and the lip was about maybe an inch and a half. See, that's the artist to me. And inside was the convex thing which curved under the lips and like that. They were perfect. And I remember them.
Hmm.
I looked at those bowls and I said, he did it. It's rosewood. It's my grandfather. This is special. Nobody told him how to, all of that without words, you know, came
Wow.
through to me. I was
Yeah.
7 years old.
Yeah. There's a
He
lot
was,
of
yeah,
intelligence.
he was an exquisite builder, maker type of thing with wood. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love these stories of people that didn't go through this like formal education, that just kind of have this knack for something, and it's just in there, and it just flows, and it's just easy. And I always found a lot more personal like connection, joy, and satisfaction when I was allowed to do that instead of when somebody was testing me and being like, what's the answer to this question that I said I've never claimed to be interested in that subject. I never said that I want to know the answer to that. And so that's why I don't think my grades were great, because I wasn't trying to prove that. I was more into my own thing. And I think that that's why I achieved a great deal of proficiency with it, because it's what I want to do. And again, I know that we all have to do things we don't want to do, and that there are chores in life, and sometimes we don't want to wash the dishes or do the laundry. I understand that too, and so we do those things anyway. But I don't think that a life well lived can be lived by devoting 40, 50 hours of the week doing something that we don't want to be doing, which is why, even though I was great at computers and great at many other things, I said, I am a voice teacher. I want to be working with singers. I want to work with passionate people. I want to help people connect with their voice. And it took me 15 years to do it full time, but here I am 20 years in. And it was hard, but I'm so glad I did. And this is what I want to encourage people to do, that it may take you 20 years to, come out from underneath, but it's worth it. Because, your life should be your life, not the life.
Yes. Well said. Well said. It should be your life. There you
Yeah.
go again. You have a great way with words.
Oh, thank you.
It's going to be great having a podcast with you because you have this ability to spring into a truth, and I really appreciate that about you.
So we have a lot of simpatico resonance, so that also helps. I don't think everybody sees me the way you do, but I wish they did. All right, well, Abby, it's great. It's been great talking with you. Thank you for that. And I'm just curious, how can people find Arts Anonymous if they are interested?
Well, it has a website, and also very soon I'm going to have my own website, and my books will be on there. And so it has a significant place, and
Okay.
you can go to a website. I think it's just artsanonymous.org, you
Okay,
know.
great. Well, thank you so much. And if people want to find out about me, they can go to singwithoutthinking.com. And Abby and I will be back with more when we start our podcast shortly. So stay tuned for that. Abby, thank you so much. I have to go teach, but it's been a great chat. Thank you. I've enjoyed this time.
Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to our future together.
Same. I'll see you. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye.